All right, everyone. Phil Scott, our esteemed governor, has decided he's going to stop dragging his heels on the marijuana issue, and he's finally decided that he's going to sign legislation that legalizes it. It looks like Vermont's framework for legalization is going to differ slightly from some. It's like with the Ohio bill that was defeated. I think this was last year. And that anti-pot, craptivists, they were saying, oh, this is a symbol that some states will resist the green menace, which is bullshit. It was actually defeated because pot advocates of legalization didn't even want it, because it would have established a state monopoly. It looks like we're very wisely not going to have that problem in this state, and that what this bill will do is it will legalize larger amounts for possession. Small numbers of plants, baby plants or mature plants, for a person to use on their own, presumably with friends and shit. And you won't need a license or anything for that. And that for larger amounts, for an actual grow operation, 50 plants or something, you'll have to pay some sort of license. And you'd be selling probably through a dispensary. And that's probably the way to go. It just makes sense to allow people to have a few plants. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all to say, well, it's okay to possess this thing, but to actually create this thing is totally illegal unless you've paid an inordinate sum, and we're assuming that you're doing it commercially. That sort of setup, like more of an Alaskan setup, is much better than what we've seen even like with Colorado. I don't think that you can even grow it. I think it's just possession is unlimited there, and you can buy it through state licensed dispensaries. Well, then where's the weed coming from? I don't know how they actually license the growers in Colorado or Washington. I remember that their systems were already slightly different. I can't remember which one was more lenient. I think it was Colorado. And Washington State was a little more stringent, a little more intervened in. It looks like we're going to take up more of a laissez-faire approach, it's actually surprising, because the state of Vermont loves to tax everything. I'm very surprised, honestly, that there weren't a lot of proponents of, hey, if you grow so much as one plant, the government wants in on it, you're going to have to pay us $100 per plant or something like that. I'm surprised that that's not what's being suggested. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Phil Scott, actually, is really just more of a reluctant drug warrior who now has capitulated to the demands of, basically about 75% of the people in the state, most of our legislature, our legals, our court system, and said, okay, fine, people will be able to have their weed. But he doesn't seem interested in setting up a more stringent system. Like, it'd take too long. I think he wants to get it done, before the next time he has to run for re-election anyway. Because otherwise, even a lot of the Republicans would say, well, there's Mr. Party Pooper himself who doesn't want people to smoke weed. The big thing that he raised as a concern was, well, people who are under 18 might end up smoking it. Phil, people already do that when they're under 18. There are kids that are like 10, 11 years old, they've already tried marijuana. Just like there are people of that age range that have like had a beer or something. The fact is, yeah, it's illegal, but it still does go on. There's really not a whole lot the state's legalism is going to be able to do about it. You can fine people or jail them for like giving drugs or beer or whatever to kids. Ultimately, though, it's a Swiss cheese fucking law. It's really, really inefficient. Most people that partake in such behavior, you're not going to know anything about it. Who fucking cares? By the way, you've got kids that are like losing their families to the opiate crisis, much bigger issue than weed. And then some people have brought up the gateway drug bullshit. And this is the funniest thing I've ever heard. Because I can remember back when gateway drug was still the norm to assume that pot was a gateway drug, like even when I was in high school. We're talking mid-2000s. We're not talking, ages ago. Not even quite a decade. Well, actually, just over a decade. I can remember the anti-drug sort of literature we saw in like health class and, some of this other shit. And it got to the point where even most of like the teachers, it was obvious that they're like, yeah, this is basically bullshit, kids. But, you've got to read it and absorb it as though it were true because the government wants to scare you straight and all that bullcrap, basically. And it is bullshit. Marijuana is not a gateway drug. The actual link between marijuana use and other drugs is that people who use hard drugs, they often have difficulty with keeping food down, difficulty with insomnia, difficulty with panic attacks, withdrawal effects, shakiness, whatever, flu-like symptoms, heroin withdrawal, and they smoke weed to take the edge off. Honestly, it's like when I was drinking to take the edge off of tobacco withdrawal. It does work. It's not that, hey, I had a beer and all of a sudden I became a smoker. No, it's more like, hey, I've got negative symptoms from withdrawal, trying to get clean off this substance. I'm going to use something that's easier for me not to use as a temporary measure just to suppress the symptoms. It does work. You know, then you get addicted to alcohol a bit to wean yourself down. But it's a lot easier than with tobacco. Trust me, for the average person, tobacco's me 10 times worse. Marijuana is not even particularly addictive. Having smoked it myself in the past, again, we're talking like, what, 8 years ago was the last time I used it. I think it's 7 or 8 years. It was a long time. And I'm glad to be rid of it because, like, it's a total fucking waste of money as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't even really get you high that much. It's a very mild drug, to tell the truth, unless you're getting a good strain or you're smoking a lot of it. You know, oh, I think I'll vape this entire ounce. Whoa, it's going to be a great time. Then you green out, pass out on the floor maybe, and just start puking everywhere. But I can tell you, when I stopped using it, it's not, I had no withdrawal at all. I'm just like, oh, I'm not smoking weed anymore. There's a little bit of habituation, like if you get used to, you know, you have a joint after your meals or something, or you smoke up, you know, around noon, or at 4:20 you blaze it, then you'll remember that for a while and sort of miss. You'll be like, oh, I wish I had a joint, but I'm not a smoker anymore. But it's not that hard. The habituation side, chemical dependency, trust me, is way worse than habituation sort of related addiction. With cigarettes, you get both. With some drugs, you get just the physical side. With others, you get just the habituation. With some, you don't get either. Like with psilocybin. Psilocybin is reverse addictive. That is, that if you take psilocybin for a period thereafter, your mind tells you, oh, that is basically poison, I don't want to use it again. For some weeks, you will not want to use psilocybin, generally speaking. Not all the time. Most anecdotes, though, suggest reverse addiction, literally, in that case. Some drugs, they wear off, and there's a cool-down period between uses, like LSD, typically, for people. But marijuana should have been legalized in the state long ago. You know, we're missing out on a cash crop anyway. People in the state who are taxed up the ass, if they grow a couple plants and they're selling it to their friends, hey, maybe they can make ends meet. Maybe it lifts somebody out of poverty, or they, you know, they're under less money stress, they're not using the heroin. Who knows? Maybe it helps somebody to get clean. It's like kratom or kratom or however the fuck you pronounce it. They're constantly trying to go after that. No, it shouldn't be made illegal. In fact, it should probably be encouraged for medical use because it appears to be effective in dealing with the withdrawal symptoms from opiates. It appears to be generally safe and effective. They can label it dangerous. Hell, yeah, take the methadone instead. That's not unsafe. That makes perfect sense. Wean yourself off of this drug with some pharmaceutical that's like, you know, you take half a dose too much and you die, instead of this herbal supplement that people, you know, generally speaking, appear not to have a problem with. You know, of course, disclaimer, not encouraging you to use it, and you could die on it, you could overdose on it. But it's going to be a little harder, I think, than like the shit that they give them in a drug rehab facility. As far as marijuana, good fucking luck trying to overdose on it. And maybe when it's legal, and when at least at the dispensary level it's licensed, it's being checked, you know, it's not going to be laced, it's not going to be sprayed with some chemical that's going to cause cancer, you know, and if you're getting it from someone who, you know, grew it personally and you happen to know them, probably you can trust the source more than if you're getting it from some sketchy dude with baggy pants in an alleyway here in Vegas. You know, probably it's more reliable. So yeah, it's about time. We can give Phil Scott credit for coming to his senses, at least. It took him a while, but okay, Phil. This shows that you have now emerged into the current decade, where people understand marijuana is not a threat to society because it's already being used regularly by about a quarter of the entire U.S. population. Regular use. And another quarter of the U.S. population at least infrequently uses or has tried it. We're talking about half of the people in the U.S. have smoked marijuana. Yeah. And it's not causing, psychosis, it's a gateway drug, it caused the heroin problem. No, the heroin problem is caused by hospitals and pharma companies and by doctors overprescribing because they were forced to. That's about all. Peace out.